In November, I was invited to talk on one of the stages at Therapy Expo. Therapy Expo is a brilliant conference for physios, osteopaths, sports therapists, massage therapists, etc., where we all get together and we talk about all topics that help us become better clinicians. What I wanted to do was take the talk that I did on the day and just record it again so that I can share it with more people. I suppose there's probably types of people that are going to be watching this. There might be some of you who went to the talk and you just wanted to go over some of the content of it again. The second type of person might be someone who wasn't able to attend or was at one of the other talks that happened to be on at the same time as mine. Third type, you may well not be a therapist of any form, but someone who's come across this because you are an older adult who is looking to introduce strength training into your routine. And this is for you as well, because it's going to give you some ideas of why might want to get started, but also how you're going to maintain your motivation. Who this isn't for, if you're a seasoned powerlifter who's looking for tips on how to increase your personal best, I'm afraid this isn't the talk for you. This is all about how we can encourage people to get started in the first place and maintain their momentum as they get going. So as we go through, we're just going to cover a couple of areas. So I'll start off just a quick introduction of who I am for anyone who hasn't come across me yet. Going to go through the physical activity guidelines. Going to quickly run over what we mean by strength training. And then we're going to discuss the benefits to the patient, challenge the patient's objections, and going to dispel any myths. And they're the kind of the three steps that are really important to help motivate anyone to get started. So a little bit about myself. I am a physiotherapist. I qualified in 2008 from Coventry. Throughout my career, I've worked throughout hospitals, sports, and now in private practice. And where the relevant parts of that are to where I've got to now in terms of having a passion for introducing strength training to over 60s is that I suppose the first real kind of desire to get into it was when I worked with the Para Snowsport GB. So that's our disabled ski and snowboard team. I worked closely when we were back in the UK with the strength and conditioning coaches at the Scottish Institute of Sport. But then when we went actually away with the team, I might be the one that was incorporating the program into their routine outside of their ski sessions. I absolutely loved it. It was great to have to really think on your feet about how do you get a similar program to work for someone who might be missing a leg to someone who is in a wheelchair, who's paraplegic, to someone who's visually impaired. All come with their own challenges, and it's not just one fits all. Really had to kind of really think deeply about how we can incorporate it and make sure everyone got the most from it, and more importantly, how that was going to then benefit their skiing. Stepping away from sport when I moved into private practice, I think the areas that I tended to work in before setting up my own physio practice was in areas with a high proportion of people who were retired. So I've got to use some of that experience of adapting strength training programs from working with athletes and using that with the general public. I found it even more rewarding because if I can get someone who avoided spending time or playing with their grandchildren because of the fear of the knee, and now they can get back to running around with them, and you'll hear a story later of Mike who's back onto a bouncy castle and not even thinking twice about it. It's far more rewarding, in my opinion. So next, we're going to come on to the physical activity guidelines. So specifically, I'm going to start with the World Health Organization. I just want you to have a quick think in your head. Have you any idea of what the physical activity guidelines? Do you know how much we should be doing as adults? So if I ask anyone and they do know the answer, they tend to know the answer to the aerobic physical activity. So what they suggest is that we should do 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic physical activity, or we should be doing 75 minutes of vigorous intensity. So generally the difference they mean there is that moderate, you should be increased work of breathing, but you're able to maintain a conversation if you needed to. against the vigorous is you would struggle to hold a conversation because you're so out of breath. There's a little bit more intricacies of it in terms of heart rate, but generally that's a nice rule of thumb to go by. And obviously you can have a combination of the two, which is often difficult to work out yourself. But if you happen to have one of the trackers, so I've got a Garmin here that on the app, it shows you how many activity minutes you've done. So if you're working in the vigorous range, they give you 2 minutes for every minute you're doing. And if you're in the moderate, they give you just 1 minute. So by the end of the day, you can see how close to your weekly target of 150 minutes you are. That covers the aerobic physical activity. But a lot of people don't know that actually there's more recommendations to your muscle strengthening and how much of that we should be doing. So again, just have a quick think. Any ideas? So I'll read out what they say. It's a muscle strengthening activities at moderate or greater intensity that involve all major muscle groups on 2 or more days a week. So yeah, basically we should be trying to strengthen all our major muscle groups on 2 or more days of the week. Now, everything I've just mentioned there is for adults aged 18 to 64. There's actually another set of guidelines for those over the age of 65. And again, if you had to take a guess of what the differences are or where those might lie, have a think about that. So in terms of the aerobic physical activity, there's absolutely no change at all. We should still be aiming for 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity. Where the differences lie is in the muscle strengthening. So I'll read it out as they say on the World Health Organization activity guidelines. Older adults should do varied multi-component physical activity that emphasizes functional balance and strength training at moderate or greater intensity on 3 or more days a week to enhance functional capacity and to prevent falls. So if I highlight a couple of parts of that, there we should be doing strength training on 3 or more days a week. And if you think back to the 18 to 64s, that was on 2 days a week or more. So we're actually expected as older adults to do more strength training than we are when we're below 64. If you'd ask most people above the age of 65, most of them would, I imagine, assume that you should actually maybe hold back, do a little bit less, maybe just work on swimming or something that's a little bit more gentle. But actually, we should be pushing and doing a little bit more. And say it's not just the World Health Organization that are suggesting this. If you look at the UK Chief Medical Officer guidelines, once again, improving muscle mass and strength at least 2 days a week. If you look at the Royal Osteoporosis Society, so they've got a document called Strong, Steady and Straight. We should be doing muscle strengthening 2 or 3 days a week. And I like that they've included in there this concept of with increasing resistance, and I'll cover that on the next slide. So what do we mean by strength training? A lot of people ask me, what's the best exercise to get stronger or something along those lines. And it's not actually about the exercise itself. It's about the intensity that we perform that exercise at. So general rule of thumb, and I'm simplifying this to make it easy to understand to get started. And then there are a bit more specifics we can do later on. But to start with, we're going to need to take the muscles to the point of fatigue. So say, for example, I suggested that someone did 10 squats. What they should find is when they do the 9th and the 10th, they're almost at the limit of what they can manage. Their muscles should be telling them that maybe I can't do many more. And actually, if you try the 11th, you might get halfway and feel and have to flop back down again because the muscles just have nothing left. That's what we mean by training to fatigue. If you finish a 10 and actually you could have probably done another 5, you're not really working at a point where you're going to get stronger as a result. Not to say that it's not worth doing at all, but if we have strength in mind and becoming stronger, we really want to be pushing to fatigue. And there are a bit more specifics. Generally, you want that fatigue to happen within 15 repetitions. And then once you've got confident at hitting fatigue around 15 repetitions, we want to move that down probably closer to the 5 repetitions. And that's where you need more weight and resistance in order to be able to do that. For some people, body weight will be enough. It doesn't have, strength training doesn't have to look like someone with a barbell across their back or dumbbells or kettlebells. Some people, body weight is going to provide all the resistance they need. For the vast majority, we are going to need some form of external resistance, whether that's in a gym, whether that's a bit of equipment at home. You can think outside the box and use things in rucksacks that have some weight to them. But yeah, generally it's preparing people for the idea that it's not just going to be high intensity bodyweight exercises. We're actually going to do slower, more controlled movements with resistance. And the last thing, it does need to be progressive. So a lot of people start to think about, once they've found a routine that begins to work for them, they're scared to move on from there in case it might cause flare up of their knee pain, or just through fear of lifting over a certain arbitrary figure of weight they might have. So they might think in their mind 20 kilograms is all that I need to do, and actually anything more is a very scary concept. But actually, if you start to do, say, your 5 repetitions with a weight, and actually that feels easy, we're now not working that strength zone anymore. So we need to increase the weight gradually in order to be able to continue to work in that strength zone. There are far better people than me to introduce strength training principles to therapists. So here's 2 that I would really recommend that you look at if you're interested in looking more into this. The first one is Claire Mitchell from Get Back to Sport. Great website and blog if you haven't checked that out already. She does some fantastic in-person courses, but also online. Definitely recommend looking at her. She also spoke at Therapy Expo. Then we've got Andrew McCauley. He does another one that's great, Unraveling Strength and Conditioning for Therapists. And he goes into a lot of mindset before he even starts talking about the strength and the weight side of things. So again, similar kind of tact to this is that it's not just about stepping into the gym and getting going. You've got to see how it's going to incorporate and fit into your life and how it's going to improve it. So moving on, how do we encourage people to get started? So I'm going to expand on all of these points in a second, but we're going to start by explaining the benefits. We're going to talk about the individual person in front of us. How can being stronger make their life better? There's probably going to be some objections they've got. And if we don't challenge those at the start and find out what they're worried about, they're probably going to creep up even later on and sort of stall the progress, and they're probably going to start to, motivation's going to wane, and then they may drop off. So now's the time to challenge any objections. Linked to that, they're probably going to have some myths, or there's going to be some negative beliefs out there about strength training or lifting weights that if we don't start to look at that and challenge them, we may lose them later on. I've found it's really helpful to talk about the stories of other people who have started later in life and really embraced it. And I'll talk through a couple of stories that I've got through the blog. But actually, it's far more inspiring than hearing me talk a theory-based talk like this to get started. If you can hear someone else that had the same problems as you did, who's made it work, then maybe I can do it too. And that's something we can use to help inspire people. And also, we want to make a plan. Is if we just help inspire someone to get started, but then don't really give them any kind of idea of how to get going, or at least kind of signpost them in the direction of somewhere that they can help make a plan, then without a plan, you're just going to fall off again. The motivation's not going to be there to continue. So the benefits. So I'll quickly skim through this. This is back according to the World Health Organization guidelines. Admittedly, this is more to do with being physically active than it is specifically for strength training, but the general kind of theme is there. By having higher levels of physical activity, we're going to improve the risk of all-cause mortality, the risk of cardiovascular disease, incidence of hypertension, incidence of site-specific cancers, incidence of type 2 diabetes, and improve or prevent falls, improve mental health, improve cognitive health, improve sleep, and improve measures of adiposity or reducing fat. If you're anything like me, just reading that, I zoned out. You're probably listening to me, that list. If I got you to recall some of them, you probably maybe 1 or 2 and forgotten the rest of them. So it's not particularly inspiring if those words don't mean anything. For some people, there might be a family member who's got type 2 diabetes and they've seen how that's affected them, and that might spark their interest. That on its own isn't going to inspire people to get started. We're going to need a bit more than that. And to sort of make a point is, if I went to anyone and said on the street, how do you lose weight? In the very simplest terms, pretty much 90%, 99% of people could tell me that in order to lose weight, you're going to need to reduce your calorie intake and increase the amount of exercise you do. And if you put yourself in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose some weight. Again, I know there's a few more intricacies than that, but in the simplest terms, that's how we lose weight. If just knowing that and having that information was enough, then we wouldn't have the obesity epidemic that we do have within the UK. And I found this graph, and the link is there below. But if we look at everyone in the 45 to 74, ignore the one on far on the right, but we'll go on for the next three. If we look at that, only 20% or 25% of people on average are in the normal range, the green zone. Overweight is purple and obese is yellow. So that means 75% or 3/4 of the population between 45 and 74 are overweight or obese, which is a lot higher than I was actually anticipating. But I think it proves the point that just knowing how to lose weight isn't enough to inspire us to do so, or really it might inspire us to start, but it's not going to keep our motivation. Another example of that is with smoking. Again, if you went to anyone in the street and asked them if smoking is good or bad for them, 99% of people know that smoking is not good for you. I don't think there's anyone believes that smoking is good for you. 6.9 million people in the UK as of 2019, and that's 14.1% of our population, are still smoking. So knowing that it's not good for you isn't enough to get people motivated enough to stop. We need a bit more than that. So again, just having the information is not always enough to make a change. So what else can we do then? So what we need to do is actually look at the individual in front of us. Everything up until that point is that list of benefits was for a population. Yes, it helps the person in front of us a little bit, but it's looking at the population as a whole, where now what we need to do is look at that individual person in front of us. So how is being stronger going to benefit them? So first we might want to look at what they enjoy doing. So a few examples. We think about sporting activities. There's running, golf, tennis, bowls, swimming, all sorts of sporting activities that your body needs a particular amount of strength to do those sports without injury, or if you need to swing a club at speed, you're going to need some muscle strength in order to swing that club. Next, we come on to grandchildren. It's a big kind of driver for a lot of people that I see, is that they've now got the time to spend with their grandchildren, and it's something that they kind of been looking forward to, but they don't feel like they've got the energy, or they might have knee pain or shoulder pain. And as much as they look forward to it, at the same time, they kind of dread how they're going to feel afterwards. And it's a big highlight for them when they can't keep up with them, and they feel like they can't give their full attention to their grandchildren. So that's a big motivator for a lot of people. Then we've got other activities. So walking, we've got travel and time in the garden, all things that a lot of people love to do, especially once you come into retirement and you suddenly got the time to do all these things that you've been looking forward to do that you didn't have when you were working. If now a lack of strength starts to affect your enjoyment of a lot of these things, we then start to sort of lose the excitement for a lot of the hobbies that we had. Not only does the lack of strength have a part to play on the physical task of doing these things, if you think back to all the sporting activities, the grandchildren and the ones on the screen here, there all comes a social aspect to it. So sport, we tend to play golf with friends. Running might be a solitary thing, but actually you might join a running club and actually like the community feel of that. Tennis, again, you need a partner to play. Walking, you might walk on your own, but again, you might go on big family walks or kind of group walks. Travel tends to be something you do with family or friends. And the garden, whilst most of the gardening itself might be on its own, you might a lot of people like to show off the garden and enjoy the garden with friends by inviting them over. With grandchildren, if you want to spend time as a family and you don't want to be the one that kind of feels like everyone else can't do something because you're not feeling up to it. So you might feel like you're losing out on those social interactions. So it's the lack of strength isn't just about the task; it's about how you fit in to your previous communities, and it's all about the social opportunities that being able to do these tasks has. So that's a big thing about how we can sort of start to feed into people's desires to want to start is actually, if they didn't have the strength to do what they currently do, what other options would they have of keeping that social interaction and not sort of feeling like they're isolated? On top of what we enjoy doing, we need to start to look at what they might need to do. So some people are going to still be working. Some of those will be doing some form of manual work that they're starting to struggle with, and they may not have the luxury or the option of actually retiring at this point. Some people are going to be primary carers, so that might be for a loved one, another family member. Again, there's going to be a certain amount of strength required in order to be able to do all the activities you need to be able to do for them. As much as some people, it's about enjoying time with grandchildren, a lot of people have to look after their grandchildren as well. And for example, my mum comes up and helps pick up my son from nursery and look after him one evening every couple of weeks so that I can then, in my physio clinic, I can work a later evening. And actually, she didn't feel like she had the energy, the strength, or she was struggling with pain and she didn't feel she was able to do that. Then it's not just her missing out on time with him, and as selfish as it sounds, it then affects me, and then it affects my earning potential, and it's a big knock-on effect. So a lot of people are looking after grandchildren so that their children can work themselves. Then there's the chores such as cleaning the house and maintaining the garden. A lot of people, gardening is something they really enjoy and it's a passion of theirs. But other people, it's a chore that they just have to kind of do the bare minimum to keep a presentable garden, and it's something they don't particularly enjoy doing but need to do. And for the cleaning and the gardening, some people have the luxury of being able to afford a gardener and a cleaner. A lot of people won't have that luxury, so they kind of need to be able to do that themselves. And again, if you feel like your garden and house aren't up to the scratch that you would like them to be, then you're probably not going to invite people around, and then you're missing out on another social interaction that you could have had. I thought I'd add this in because I thought this was quite interesting, that if we look at the average weight of a child, even at 1 year old, if we're looking at boys, they're just over 10 kilos on average, 12.5 at 2, and that goes up to a 5-year-old, it's close to 20 kilos. And if I liken that to my son, he is going to be 2 in February, so in a couple of months' time. He is on the 99th centile for height and weight, and he is already 13.6 the last time I weighed him a couple of weeks ago. So he's kind of the weight of a 2.5-year-old before he's even turned 2. And the point I'm trying to make is that if I put let's say a 15, 16 kilo kettlebell or dumbbell in front of one of my patients, they'd look at me like I'm crazy sometimes, and there's no chance I can lift that. And actually, when I ask them about their family life, they've got a 2-year-old that they have been lifting and need to be able to lift to get in the car, to get out of the bath, to put back in the cot. So often they're doing more than they think they can, but when it comes to exercise, they think they need to stay safe, and they'll pick up a pair of 1 kilo dumbbells, and that in their mind is making them stronger, but actually it's far from what they need to be able to do in order to look after the grandchildren. So nice little additional slide in there that I thought was interesting, and something I use in my patients to just remind them you need more strength than you think you do. So now we need to look at objections. Often if they've got to the age of 60 or above and they haven't done any strength training, it's probably a couple of reasons why. So one, it's either that it's something that they just never appealed to them. Some people that they might thought about it, but an existing injury or chronic condition has made them think that it's potentially dangerous and they might get in. They might have tried some form of program online, but found that they just, there's an exercise they can't do. And because I can't do that one, then what's the point of doing any of them? And they just lose the motivation and feel like they're kind of just having to adapt too much or change too much. A lot of people don't have access, especially in the last couple of years with lockdown and COVID, is they may not be able to go to the gym and then they haven't got the equipment at home. Now gyms are open. A lot of people don't necessarily want to go to the gym, firstly because fear of the spread of COVID, but also before that, even people often fear being judged in the gym. So there's a lot of these kind of objections that if we don't think about what those objections are and we don't start to come up with ideas of how we can kind of create strategies to get around those objections, then whilst they might have some initial motivation to get started, that motivation is likely to wane. Linked to that, there's likely to be some myths. So one I hear all the time is, I'm too old, surely weight section of a gym is for people in their 20s, 30s. Often they think the heavy weights is something that's unsafe. And it's important to say, but same as anything, that there are going to be risks associated with lifting weights or performing exercise against resistance, in the same way that there would be if you go for a run. There's strategies we can use to minimize those risks. And often it's just gradually starting and gradually building. So for example, if you went out and run a marathon without any training whatsoever, you're probably going to get injured. Same way as if you go and put your body weight on a bar and try and squat with it without having done any preparation work beforehand, you're probably going to get injured. So yeah, we want to make sure that there's a plan in place to gradually build up. My argument be that actually being inactive and being weaker is far more unsafe and more likely to cause injuries than being stronger. We want to reframe that as having strength is going to make you robust and resilient so that you can deal with demands of daily life and do more active, enjoyable activities that you want to do. A lot of people think that they should stick to swimming and Pilates. And a nice example, if I go back to that document, Strong, Steady, Straight from the Royal Osteoporosis Society, they talk about people with osteoporosis should be doing weight bearing with load and impact. Now, if you ask anyone with osteoporosis what they're scared of, it's probably weight bearing with load and impact. So most people tend to avoid what they need and stick to non-impact activities like swimming and Pilates. And I'm not knocking them at all. Swimming and Pilates are great, and I would encourage people to incorporate that into a weekly routine. But you need to incorporate that weight bearing with load, which is doing squats or something similar with a weight. And also we can incorporate some impact into that. So there's a few more kind of explosive exercises we can add in later on. A lot of people are scared of things like osteoarthritis as well, that it might make that worse. But actually, lack of strength tends to cause more flare-ups in arthritis than being stronger does. So again, it's that whole robustness and resilience that if we've got nice strong muscles, we've got a nice smooth suspension system in the legs, and we're actually shielding the joints from our arthritic changes. Then we're going to come on to other people's successes. So again, I've really found talking about what other people can do really inspiring to others. I've got a few stories here. If you're watching on this on YouTube, in the video description, there's going to be a link to a page on the blog, and I'll probably put a link to these as well. But you'll have a look in the video description and you'll find out where to find more about these amazing people. So first one, we'll start with the one on the left, is what they refer to as Super Sue. So she's based over in the States, and she unfortunately lost her husband, and at the time she was caring for him quite a lot and she wasn't looking after herself. She realized that she couldn't really walk to the end of the block or a couple of blocks without really feeling out of breath and feel like she had to go back. She had 3 sons herself and decided that she didn't want them to lose her too through something that she could have done about. So she joined a group that's based at one of the local CrossFit gyms that just did resistance and strength training for over 60s. And she's just really embraced it. She's never felt better. And as you see there, she's deadlifting a good amount of weight. In the link for her, there's a kind of local news video on there that I recommend you do watch because it, again, really inspiring. You can have a look at Veronica's story by clicking one of the links below. And then I'm going to come on to one of my favorite ones is Mike's story. So Mike is someone who in lockdown decided he wanted to try to build some strength. Inspired by his two daughters, each have two children, and they just started to incorporate strength training, and he really wanted to do that. So he'd always been active, done trail running, mountain biking, skiing, walking, and he'd started to notice that he was struggling to do some of these at the previous level, and it was affecting his enjoyment, mainly because of knee pain. And also he found that lifting his granddaughter, he was always worried about his wrists, and he tended to have to put a splint. So he started to try and find a strength training program. He actually found the Never Taught to Lift ebook, which guides someone through creating their own program and adapting the exercises around any difficulties they have. And he created his own program, stuck with it, progressed it as it recommended, and he's continued to progress. And you can see he's not doing it at the gym. He did it through lockdown, so he's got some of the bits of equipment at home. But not only has he done fantastically in the gym, he's now back to trail running without pain. He's lifting his mountain bike onto the bike rack there. He recently told me he went to his grandson's four-year-old grandson's bouncy castle party, and he wasn't just sitting watching. He was on the bouncy castle to the rest of them. He wasn't wearing his splint. He wasn't worried about his wrist. It wasn't even a second thought. And it's the being stronger. It's not just about what you can do in the gym. It's all those opportunities it gives you outside of the gym, and that's how we help inspire people. Phil's is another great story that it's one of the more recent ones that you can have a look on. He's actually been seeing me in the clinic, but the link will be below. At this point in the talk at Therapy Expo, I showed a video that some of you may have seen before, but of an advert that I only saw it last year. Whether it was out before then, I'm not too sure, but it shows a granddad found a kettlebell in his garage or a shed, and the struggles of him trying to lift that, and then the disapproving looks from his neighbours and the worried, concerned look from his daughter. And I won't ruin it because it's a fantastic video, but it just epitomizes everything that I'm trying to share with this, and it's one that I actually share to some of my patients who show an interest. So again, I'll put that link in with everything else. But please, it's only a couple of minute long video, but it's powerful video, emotional. I had a couple of people in tears actually at the Therapy Expo talk. I say I had it. It's the video had people in tears because it was so well done. The last thing I really want to talk is making a plan, and I come back to the running, and I think about Couch to 5K and how successful that's been. And it's not just because someone talked about the benefits of running and said, right, you're at the point where you can't do anything, and you're inactive and being on the couch, and we're going to get to the point of running 5 kilometers. I mean, that in itself is a great concept of it. It's telling you your start point, telling you an end point, but it doesn't leave you with that and just say you're going to feel better for it, see how you go. It creates a plan, and it gives you gradual, incremental progress to make. It gives you a clear set out plan along the way. That's what we have to try and do with strength training. So it might be initially we get someone to turn up to the gym twice a week. We don't have to necessarily be too specific with what we're giving them. I tend to introduce movement patterns I want them to do. I haven't really talked about it much here, but some people can't do, say, a squat. They can't do the body weight because their knee hurts. So there's ways that we can adapt the squat, or we can actually regress it. And everyone tends to know about how you progress things. You add weight to it, or you do things faster, or you do it more explosively, or you change the position of the bar. But a lot of people don't necessarily think, well, what if you can't do a squat? There's often regressions that you can make and adaptations you can make to make things easier. And that's often the hardest bit, is finding the start point. So initially you just want to help people turn up, find the start point, make them feel like they're actually doing a workout. get them comfortable with the movement patterns, and then we can bring in the concept of moving to fatigue or pushing the muscles to fatigue. And then once we've got fatigue point happening at 15 repetitions and they're happy with it, there's no adverse reactions, then maybe I bring it down to 12 repetitions, then 10, then 8, then 6, then 5, and then maybe bring it back up again. But we want to have that plan in place. And if people don't know there is a longer term plan and they think they're just doing session by session without a real idea of where they're moving towards, then again, you tend to lose people and they tend to lose their motivation. So let them know there's a plan. We're probably going to have to adapt it. We might have to change things earlier than we wanted to, or we might have to kind of stall at a particular level before we can actually move up. But as long as people know they're on a plan, they're more likely to stick with it. You don't want to make it too easy at the start because people get bored if it's too easy. Equally, you don't want to make it too challenging that they're causing a reaction in pain, or it's just too hard to do, so it puts them off doing it. So each person is going to be slightly different. So just keep getting feedback from them. And then, like I said, don't forget to progress, keep progressing their exercises. So I think that covers everything in terms of getting people stronger. So just to recap, if we look at all the physical activity guidelines, we should all be doing 2 to 3 sessions of muscle strengthening. We want to make sure that we know what muscle strengthening is and how to achieve it. So basically, we're going to push muscles to fatigue, and ideally within 15 repetitions. We're going to explain the benefits. So we can use that big list and show them actually if they are physically active and they're meeting all the guidelines, so the aerobic plus the muscle strengthening, they're going to reduce the risk of all these type of illnesses, but also how it's going to improve their life. And that's where you need to do a bit more digging of what they need to do, what they want to do, what they're currently doing. And then we're going to show how being stronger can help all of that. Going to challenge the objections, challenge any negative beliefs, challenge any myths. Do that towards the start. Don't wait till it becomes an issue later on. Use some stories to help inspire people. Again, little plug for the blog is if you tell them about Never Told to Lift. At the moment, most of my posts are these stories. I'm getting lots of people sending me stories that they want me to feature on there because they've been inspired by theirs, and they're hoping just something within their story might resonate with someone else, and that just helps someone make a change. So equally, if you know of anyone or you are someone who has been lifting weights into your 60s, whether you started before or ideally the better stories or the ones that are really inspiring for people are the ones who actually started in their 60s and have really sort of taken it on from there. If you know of anyone, then please get them to contact me. So give them the details of the blog, and there's a contact page on there. And then the last thing is make a clear plan, easy start point with room for progressions, and that they know those progressions are going to happen. And then obviously I asked at the end if there's any questions, which you're not going to be able to do in this video, but if you do have any questions, please comment below with any questions that you have, or feel free to go to the blog, find any of the contact details there, and you can send me a message, and I'm more than happy to can help. If you have anyone that is starting or wanting to start, or if you are someone watching this who's inspired to take action and get going, then I will mention the Never Told to Lift ebook, which is now actually available as paperback on Amazon. It helps you find and create your own 12-week strength training program. So it's going to help you kind of fill the workout template with exercises, but also not just the exercises, the variations of the exercise that are going to work as a start point. And then it's going to guide you through adding resistance at the right stages so that you can really build strength. Please do check that out if either you've got someone who wants to start training and you want to give them a signposting towards something to get going, or if you're someone who wants to start themselves, and then check that out. For now, any questions, do get in touch. But I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like this video. Please share it with anyone that you know that might benefit from it. The shares, the likes, the subscribe to the channel, it really does help me reach new people. It's a message that I think is really important. I really do want to get it out in front of more people. So if any way of you wanted to help pay me back, it's just do one of those things. So like the video, share it with someone, and subscribe to the YouTube channel or to the Facebook page. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.